Hi everyone, and welcome back to episode 10 of ReefStock at Home. I'm Jeremy, your host again, and thanks for joining me. We've got a quite feature-packed episode this month. We've got different tanks for different lifestyles, which again is right up my street. And I'm personally choosing tanks right now, thinking about, do I want a big tank? Do I want a small tank? And we've got two guys coming on to talk about them. We've got Ross from Bearded Reef. He's up in Scotland. He's a new ish reef keeper. He's not a new fish keeper. He's a seasoned freshwater fish keeper who changed to reef during lockdown, and he's going to be talking about his tank. And we've also got Dave from Reef Escapes, who's going to be talking about tank choice, fish choice, which fish are easy for beginners, which fish are more difficult, what's entailed in a larger tank and larger fish to go in there, but also about quarantining for pests and diseases. That's coral diseases, fish diseases, even clam kind of, hitchhikers and that sort of thing. So we've got loads going on. We've got, as ever, we got a chance to win some goodies as well for us in the UK. So you can comment and subscribe. If you subscribe to this new channel now, this is the ReefStock channel. So there's three ways to kind of digest the Reef Builders brand now, as I said last time. So we've got Reef Builders, the YouTube channel, we've got the ReefStock channel, which is what you're watching me on now, and Reef Therapy. So this is a new kind of breakaway channel. If you click to subscribe and leave a comment, and you'll have a chance of winning that skimmer, but also a radiant light from Ecotech Marine. So please subscribe and comment, and you might get some free equipment. Who knows? And it's good equipment too. Special shout out to sponsors Brightwell, Ecotech, obviously, NIOS, Polyp Lab, ICP Analysis, and let's start with Ross at Bearded Reef.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining me. My name's Ross. I've got a little YouTube channel called Bearded Reef for obvious reasons, and in this little clip I'm going to talk about why I chose this little Waterbox Peninsula Mini 15 gallon, why it fits my life, and how to choose a tank to fit your lifestyle. So first of all, I started up during lockdown. I was on furlough at the time, looking for a little project to do. I've always kept freshwater aquariums, so I decided that I was going to take the plunge and move into marines. So, as you do, and as everybody should do, I spent countless hours, days, weeks, months even, doing all my research on the forums, on YouTube and so on, looking at different videos, try to decide what I wanted and plan out my tank. So, I lead quite a busy lifestyle, I work full time, I've got a lot of hobbies, I'm busy quite a lot, so I didn't want something that was going to take up too much of my time. You can quite easily get sucked in and end up having to spend so much time in this hobby, it's unreal. So I decided that I was going to go for a nano tank. Wanted something smaller, manageable, but easy kind of maintenance. So I had narrowed it down to a choice of two really. First one for me was a little Fluval Evo 13.5 gallon. The second choice was the little Waterbox Peninsula Mini 15 gallon. So decided that the 15 gallon was the one that I was going to go for, the Waterbox, based on a couple of factors mainly. Just due to the fact that I liked the shape of the tank better, liked the build quality of the tank. It was a lot nicer to look at, for me anyway, than what the Fluval was. So I decided to go for the Waterbox. Touch wood, I've not regretted that. I think it's a great decision, and it's a fantastic little tank. They do two different versions of this in the kind of nano size. They do a 25 gallon or a 15 gallon. I went for the 15 purely just based on the space that I had here and where I was putting it. This is my kind of little office in the house, so I wanted it to be in here so that I could see it in that. So yeah, I chose the 15 gallon tank to go for. I suppose the main reason that I went for this tank was my busy lifestyle, I suppose. So I don't have lots of time. I work some long days, I work away from home sometimes, and work changes week to week. So I wanted something that wasn't going to take hours and hours on end to do maintenance on. So basically with this little tank, I've kept it a very, very simple setup. There's not much to this tank at all. A quick run through of how the tank runs. So as you'll see, it's quite a simple setup. I've got a little AI Prime 16 HD on the top there for the light. When we move on to filtration, I've removed the standard filter sock that comes with the tank, and I've put in a filter floss cup. Now that filter floss cup just holds filter floss. You just pull it out, replace it. When it's done, throw it away, that's it. So I do that maybe twice, 3 times a week, just walk into the room, lift out the floss, put new stuff in, and that's it done. After that, it flows through into the second chamber. It passes through some activated carbon and into the bio balls. So I've got the Max Spec bio balls. Now I've got these in an Aquaprint UK bio ball holder and the actual media stand on top of that for the activated carbon to sit in. So it flows through both the activated carbon and the bio balls. Now I have reduced my bio balls down. Beginner mistake, I put a kilo of bio balls in this tank to start with, which is far too much. It was just pulling my nutrients right down. So what I then done was I gradually removed some bio balls every week, and I'm now down to what I think is my kind of running spec of bio balls. So I've got 5 in this tank, which doesn't sound a lot, but it is only a 15-gallon tank, so it's probably still overkill for this, to be fair. Once it's flowed through, the Max Spec bio balls goes into chamber 3. I've got my auto top off in there. Now that is used, it's the optical auto top off, that's used to replace any of the water that evaporates from the tank. So it's just pure fresh RODI water that goes in to replace that evaporated water. I'll fill that up once a week. It uses approximately 5 litres, a 10-litre container, so I just top that up once a week when I do my maintenance, and that's it. So yeah, that's in chamber 3. Also in chamber 3 I've got my heater, my temperature sensor for the temperature controller, and my return pump. That is all I have in this tank. It is very, very simple. If we go back to kind of at the start, when I first started the tank, I made my aquascape and so on outside the tank, built it all up the way I wanted, and then put it inside the tank. Added my sand and so on and let it cycle. I cycled the tank using Dr. Tim's, but yeah, that's really the main thing in this tank. Now this tank is a predominantly softy LPS tank. I don't plan on keeping SPS in this tank, to be honest with you. I keep it more softy and LPS. That's what I like the colour, I like the movement and so on. Now, when it comes to weekly maintenance, all I do is I do my weekly maintenance on a Sunday. So I do my water tests the day before, make sure all my parameters are right. One thing I will say, don't go chasing parameters, don't look for a specific number. Get your tank to a steady level and just keep it there. Just monitor that it's not going up and down too much and just try and keep a steady level. Whether that be higher or lower than your mate's tank, it doesn't matter. Just keep it at a steady level. You'll see when your tank's healthy and when it's happy. So yeah, like I say, Sunday comes around, so I do my water change. So I make up 10 litres of water. I make that up using the Tropic Marin Pro reef salt. Now, I found that to be really, really good reef salt. That mixes up in approximately half an hour. So all I do is I put the 10 litres of RODI water in a bucket, add in my salt. So for me, on the Tropic Marin Pro reef salt, that's 430 grams of salt. So I add that in, set the pump in there and put a little heater in. Leave that for half an hour and that'll be mixed. So in the meantime, when I'm doing that, I clean my glass, I siphon some of the sand, I just disturb it up a bit. And then I take out 10 litres of water through the siphon. So I siphon out 10 litres of water. I actually put that in a separate tank. I've got another tank for the crabs to go in and so on. So that goes into my little separate tank and that gets emptied out from there. Once the tank water's ready, the fresh stuff, I just add that into this tank. I've also changed the filter floss again on a Sunday, so that's that. And that's really it. So to be honest with you, full tank maintenance from start to finish is no more than 45 minutes. So for me, to spare 45 minutes a week to do some maintenance in this tank, to keep it looking good and healthy, is more than adequate. I'm happy with that. I can do 45 minutes at any time. I choose to do it on a Sunday, usually when I've got most free time, but you can do it at any time. Now, if you do go down the route of choosing a bigger tank, you can go up to 3, 4, 5, 6 foot tanks. They're fantastic, they look great, you can add so much fish in them, so much coral, there's so much more options with them. But just bear in mind that if you have a slightly busy lifestyle at all, it's probably not the tank for you. If you do a 10% water change, that on some of these tanks that's 600, 700, 1,000 litres, 10% is a lot of water to be mixing up every week. Not to mention making your RODI water, so you have to make that all up first, mix up your salt water, add it all into the tank, take it. There's a lot of work goes into that. Now I have a lot of freshwater tanks and I know the work involved in them. The saltwater tank's a little bit more involved, just purely making up salt water and RODI water and so on. But yeah, just think carefully. If you're going to choose a big tank, be prepared to do a lot of maintenance on it. I think I'm going to stick to smaller tanks now. I will be upgrading this at some point in the future. When I do get a bit more time, once I've settled in and know what I'm doing, I'm going to be upgrading to probably a 4 foot tank for me. Now that is still a lot more maintenance, but at this stage of my life, this little tank's going to do me. So that's really the key points of why this tank fits my lifestyle anyway. like I say, it is predominantly soft corals and LPS that I've put in here. Nothing drastic, it's all relatively easy to keep stuff. I have had some issues with this though. I've had issues with some of the fish, I've had issues with my corals, I've had issues with some green hair algae, some cyanobacteria and so on. So you will have issues with your tank. Don't think that you're going to set this up and you're going to have a tank like all these stunning Instagram tanks that you see. There is tanks out there that look absolutely incredible, but they are not new tanks. They've been on the go for a long time. If you do see a new tank looks incredible, chances are he's either in between stages of having problems or not quite reached those problem stages yet. But if you're interested in setting up a marine tank, you will have problems. Your tank will look ugly at stages, and that's just part of this hobby. Don't treat the hobby as a competition. So many people out there are treating this hobby as a competition, and I don't understand why they do it. It's not a competition. Don't look at other people's tanks and think, oh, they've got that, mine needs to be better than them. Don't. Don't listen to other people. You do your tank for what you want to do. It's very, very easy to look at somebody else's tank and think, yep, that's what mine should look like. Your tank should look like how you want it to look like. Don't fall into the trap of people saying to you, you must have SPS, you're not a real reef keeper and so on. That's not true. If you can keep a tank, regardless if it's fish, soft corals, LPS, SPS, whatever you want to put in it, that's your tank. You do what you want to do. I can't stress that enough. So many people in this hobby seem to treat it as a competition, and it's not. So yeah, that's really my main points on this, to be honest with you. I think it's just one of those things that you really have to focus on it and be consistent. As long as you're consistently checking your parameters every week, doing a weekly water change and doing your maintenance, things will be fine. It's not a difficult hobby, you just have to be consistent. You can't neglect it for weeks on end, you've got to be there. So if you have a busy lifestyle, little nano tank's probably the one for you. Now what I will say is with the little nano tanks, you do have some issues with the fact that it's a small volume of water. So any change in that volume of water, be it your alkalinity swings, your temperature, your salinity, anything like that, that's got a massive effect on that tank compared to if it's a much larger tank. A much larger tank, you can get away with things a bit more. You can have a couple of days extra. You really need to be on it with these small tanks. So just bear that in mind. If you are going to go for a nano tank, it is slightly more difficult to run the tank, but maintenance is easier. So it's a balancing act really. You have to decide what's going to be best for you. That's what's best for me anyway. So yeah, this is my little tank. That's why I chose it. That's why it fits my lifestyle. And it works for me. So think carefully before you choose a tank, and hopefully this has been of some help to you. So like I said, my name's Ross. Bearded Reef's my YouTube channel, so thank you very much for staying with me on this one, and hopefully that's been of some help to you guys. Okay, thanks guys, take care, bye bye.
So massive thanks to Ross for contributing. Cute little tank. I want one of those little peninsula tanks, and it made me think. Actually, maybe I'm busy. I've got loads going on as well. Maybe I just need a nano reef. Maybe I'm planning things too big. But yeah, really interesting. Again, don't treat it as a competition. What wise words they are. That's something that I've kind of alluded to, but never kind of put it into words. Don't treat it as a competition. There's so much competition in, especially in freshwater and marine fish keeping, especially aquascaping. But with the marine guys, it's like it too. It's like if you're not keeping aquapora, you're a nobody. So really grateful to Ross for bringing up that subject, and also be consistent. Don't chase numbers. Again, we spoke about this last time, so really good to have it echoed by Ross. You just need stable, good water. It doesn't have to be, a certain parameter. It doesn't have to be a certain pH and a certain KH. It can actually be within quite a wide range as long as you stick to a certain number and not try and alter it too much. So really useful. Thank you, Ross. And yeah, I'll have to look into one of those nano tanks myself. Now, on the subject of coral diseases and pests, this is a big deal. So this kind of comes into reef keeping. You set up your reef tank, and you cycle it, and you get algae problems, and then you start buying corals. And once you get into the corals and you realize what you can grow and what you can't grow, you end up with, sometimes, unfortunately, pests and diseases. And these can be avoided by dipping corals, and dipping corals is a big subject at the moment. Obviously, Red Sea has just launched a new dip onto the market, but also quarantining. So, just like fish, the advice really for everyone, including me, is to, if you buy a coral, dip it. And quarantine it. I bought just a Montipora capricornis the other day, just a bog standard Monty, but it was a bit pinker and a bit brighter than normal, and it had come from someone's tank. And I got it home and I dipped it. I thought I did the right thing, and I mounted it in the tank and I watched it for a few days, and it didn't do very well. And I watched it and I watched it, and then I saw it. I saw a Montipora eating nudibranch eating my Monty. So whether or not it was eggs that the dip didn't eliminate, or whether they spread from something else, I don't know. But I'm kicking myself because now potentially it's the only Monty in there, but it's going to prevent me from adding other Monties, and now I need to get it back out, dip it again, and really I should have just quarantined it. So also Marissa, our new team member here at Reef Builders, she put me onto a story that came up in the Washington Post about a coral die-off in the Florida Keys. Now, I've never been to Florida. Over in the UK, we have heard about the kind of staghorn and elkhorn die-off going on there for many years for lots of different reasons. But there's also something else going on that the guys are trying to prevent. And conserve quite a few hard coral species. So it's a disease called stony coral tissue loss disease. And basically, it's affected 20 different species of coral all over this 360-mile stretch of reef, right down to the Caribbean. And the guys in Florida are going to do something about it. So they've collected 2,000 coral colonies from these 20 species, and they've moved them across 14 states into 20 facilities. And they're now trying ex situ conservation. So they've removed them from the wild, from the threat in the wild, in an attempt to, propagate them, eliminate the disease, work out what it is, learn how to keep these corals at the same time, and then importantly, once they've isolated them and they're disease free and they've learned how to keep them, learn how to propagate them sexually so that they can then produce them. They can look at which ones are more resistant. I believe some corals in the wild are surviving it, so maybe they're going to try and get DNA from those corals. And then once they can produce disease-resistant corals, then they can obviously seed them back onto the reef. So that's really important, and that just goes to show, we do things on a very small scale with our reef tanks, but we're basically doing exactly the same as the guys who are doing, research in conservation, and we're all the same. Reef keepers are doing citizen science. It's all really useful stuff. So our next featured video is Dave from Reef Escape. Now, Dave is going to offer us more advice about tank selection, fish selection, coral selection, but also he's known for quarantining. So he quarantines all of the corals that come into his store. He runs an LFS. We're exactly on the same page. I can imagine if I worked in his LFS, certainly be saying the same stuff and giving the same advice. So have a watch of Dave, have a look around his store, take his advice about the quarantining and the dipping especially, and let's have a watch.
Hey, this is Dave from Reef Escape. Welcome to the shop. We are fully open all the time now, and we look forward to seeing you soon. And one of the things that sets us apart from everyone else in the industry, we feel, is that we truly do a hospitalized quarantine on all our fish, and we are equally as likely to tell you no, you shouldn't buy something as we are to sell you something that we have in stock. We want you to be as successful as you can be in this hobby, and one of the greatest things that we can do for you is to educate you as much as possible. So this is a Red Sea Reefer 170. This is about a 32-gallon display tank, and this is a great tank for a beginner. One of the difficult things with a tank is that a lot of times people want to go very small with their tank to start with, but smaller doesn't necessarily mean easier, because things change in a small volume of water very quickly. Doesn't mean that they won't change in a large volume of water, but it's going to happen a lot slower typically than it would happen in a small tank. So this is kind of that nice median tank. It's not too big, it's not too small. One of the things that we really like about the Red Sea Reefers is that they do come with a stand, and they also come with a sump system. As you can see in our sump system, we've got all kinds of equipment in there, and it doesn't mean that an all-in-one tank doesn't work. It's just that typically you can get a little bit higher quality equipment, and you can get bigger equipment that's going to do a little bit better job than something in an all-in-one, where everything's kind of contained in the back of the tank. So a tank like this is definitely not, the corals that are in here is definitely not a beginner level tank, but this is a small predator tank here that we have. We've got predatory fish that don't grow very large. There are things like a two-spot hogfish that's swimming around there. That's the yellowfish. There is a dottyback somewhere in here. He looks like he's hiding right now. We've got a couple of pygmy red rooster fish. They are on the bottom hiding, and you see them come out every once in a while. There's a coral croucher goby. Two of those fish in there, the pygmy red rooster fish and the goby, the coral croucher, Those are all ones that are going to be venomous, so you have to be really careful about what you choose. They're cool looking fish. They're not going to kill you if you get stung by one of their spines, but it could hurt. You could have an allergic reaction to them and have a little bit of hypersensitivity. This tank itself is set up as a reef tank. Not all tanks have to be a reef tank. You could definitely do a fish-only tank. We've set up tanks like this, perfect for a couple pairs of seahorses, people who are just getting into the hobby who want to do a few clownfish and some other fish. All different kinds of things will do really well in here. But one of the things that we always tell people is pick your fish, pick what you want to have in the tank, and then let's talk about what tank size fits you, because there's a lot of fish that would not be able to stay in this tank. Lots of people come in and they want to get dory, the hippo tang. Those are not going to fit in a tank like this. Even in a short period of time, they grow very quickly when they're small, and they will rapidly outgrow this tank. And a lot of fish, when they outgrow a tank, become very aggressive and they can cause all kinds of problems. On top of that, they can also injure themselves in a tank that's way too small. So we always tell people, if you absolutely have to have a certain fish, then your tank needs to be sized appropriately for that fish. Plenty of options for smaller systems, but a lot of people come in because all they know is they know Dory, they know Nemo, and they want to get those. And a tank like this, great for Nemo, not great for Dory. So this tank is a little bit different than the reefer that we were looking at earlier. This is a 150-gallon look-through in-wall tank. This one is designed for soft corals and a little bit of LPS coral in there as well. In this tank we have a lot of different tangs. Sometimes the solution to tang aggression is to add more tangs to kind of break that up. We have a nice balance in here right now that they all get along. These fish are all appropriately sized for this tank, although some of them might eventually outgrow this system. We're one of those places where we could actually move them into a larger system once they get too big for the system. But in this tank you see there's a lot of soft corals. There's a toadstool leather that's being focused on right now. On the right bottom corner there you can see some of the fish that require the bigger systems. There's a sailfin tang there. They get to be quite large. There's also a yellow tang underneath it. We also have a koi scopus tang in there, and also purple tang and a black tang. All of those are different zebra soma tangs that typically you wouldn't want to mix, but if you are going to mix them, you put them in at the same time, and they will kind of establish a pecking order in there. We also have a Tamini tang in there, so you can definitely mix different types of tangs with different body shapes together. And we've got some other fish in there as well. There's chromis. One of the myths about chromis is that they are a great schooling fish. They're a great schooling fish in really large systems. We will advise people all the time that if you buy 3 or 4 chromis and you put them in a very small tank, you're going to end up with one. They will fight and they will kill each other off till there's only one left. Some of the fish that you want to be careful about in choosing and really balancing out, what your original aquarium looks like. Lots of people want to have clownfish in their tanks, and we have a pair of lightning maroons here. Lightning maroons are actually all captive bred nowadays. They came from pretty much a single specimen. I think they caught a few more down over the years, but they all came out of Papua New Guinea, and it was a guy named Matt Pedersen. Matt's a publisher and a fish breeder. He's a great guy, but he is the one who bred these, and his clownfish have been all over the hobby. The only drawback about the lightning maroons, though, even though they're incredibly unique, and this is a naturally occurring, not sure if it's an abnormality, a change in the genes, but this is a naturally occurring pattern on these guys. The thing you want to watch out for is that if you get clownfish, you need to get ones that will fit your tank. These guys are probably the most aggressive clowns in the industry right now. And every time we put our hands in this tank, the big female there will bite us. Yep, so it's the one that is a little bit bigger. You can see the male kind of hovering there. The female is now behind the rock and underneath. But she bites us all the time, and that's something that you want to consider. They will also bite other fish. They will bite just about anything that comes into their range if they feel like it's a threat to their territory. When we put our hands in there, it's an instant threat to her for some reason. So let's talk a little bit about beginner versus expert fish. There's different kinds of fish that will fit different lifestyles, and you want to make sure that the fish that you purchase fit what you want. We can start down with this tank here. This tank here has a number of different fish in it that kind of run the gamut of beginner to expert only fish. So if you take a look at the clownfish, those are all the same thing. You know, clownfish, these are designer clowns from ORA. These are called Mocha Storms, and eventually you'll only want to have 2 of them. But clowns are one of the easier fish out there. They are related to the damselfish, and one of the greatest things about damselfish is that they're very durable. In the same tank as these, however, we have some really difficult high-end fish. So for instance, we have the blue star or vermiculated leopard grasses. That's what these are here. There's 5 of these, and these are one of the fish that actually require a fine sand bed because they will dive into the sand. We also have an ornate leopard grass. That's the biggest one there swimming around. Those are what I would consider to be higher, you don't want to start with a fish like that. They can go south at any point in time, and it's really a question of, is your tank mature enough to support these? Do they have the right setup? Do they have sand to hide in? And we take care of a lot of it by quarantining these and treating them with all different kinds of medications, getting rid of all the different pathogens that might affect them. But you still have to have a fish that's happy and able to survive in your tank. Let's take a look at some other fish here too. Over there we have a regal angelfish. That is one of it's considered to be a holy grail of the aquarium trade here. And the regal angelfish are incredibly difficult fish. They are an expert-only fish until you get them eating what you want them to eat. In the wild, they are obligate spongivores, so that means they only eat sponges, and there are very few prepared diets that will keep them fed and healthy. So we try and get them in at a small size, and the goal behind getting them in at the small size is that we can train them to eat other things. So that one is actually the perfect size for kind of training. And we have another one over here in the corner. That one's actually a little bit small, so that one's going to be a lot more difficult. The goal with these guys is to continue to throw as much food at them as you possibly can and get them to eat anything. Now the difficulty with that is that if we don't get them to eat, then they will slowly waste away, and the less likely they are as they waste away to want to try anything. They lose their energy and then they don't eat anything at all. You can also see we have some hailstorm ocellaris clowns in there. Again, a different pattern of designer clown. Those guys are really cool. Again, those are an ORA product, just like the Mocha Storms. But those guys are about as easy as you can have versus the other fish in there, the regal, which is about as difficult as you can have. Something like up at the top, you also have a McCoster's flasher wrasse, and that's the one right up there. And flasher wrasses are really great. They're incredibly pretty fish. They change throughout their lives, and they develop into what's called the terminal male phase, where they are just in kind of all their glory. Very colorful. That one's displaying a little bit for you right now. But one of the things you have to also be aware of is that you can't have an open top tank with the flasher wrasse, because you know that the second you put it in, it's going to jump out. So lots of fish require different settings, and especially fish like those, they're jumpers. Even clowns are jumpers. So let's talk a little bit about some really expert fish that need a lot of swimming space. So over in this tank over here, well, we've got purple queen anthias. So purple queen anthias, like all anthias, have a very high metabolism. So they need to eat multiple times throughout the day. They are planktivores, so they eat whatever is floating around in the system. Now these guys in particular are especially difficult because they are very, very poor shippers. So we got in some nice large ones. This is the first time we've been able to get them in this big. And these guys will grow up to 8 inches long, so they require a massive, massive tank. They also live in big colonies, and they will often hide in coral heads and dart in and out of the water column. These guys are all actually females right now. We see a couple of them that might be transitioning to male, but they will choose one male to be the dominant male, the alpha, and then there will be a hierarchy within that, and then there's also going to be dominant females and a hierarchy within the female population as well. So if you look at the one that's got a little more gold along its nose and going back along its back, that one looks to be like it's transitioning slowly into a male. But these are, again, really expert-only fish, and we don't recommend that people get these unless they can set up an auto feeder to add food multiple times throughout the day, and also have a really well-established tank, and also an incredibly large system. These are destined for a 10-foot by 10-foot by 4-foot front-to-back tank, and they will go into there, probably a colony of around 10 of those. We have more of them in the tank right below there, and as you can see, there's some various sizes, but none of these are full-on adults yet. They will grow much larger than that, and like I said, they grow up to about 8 inches. Again, these are the purple queen anthias, and there's lots of different anthias species, but you always want to make sure you have the right balance of different fish in there. There are some species of anthias where if you only have 2 of them, the male will harass the female so much that it could kill her. So you always want to do a few of them. There's very few of them that really like to be by themselves, but we do offer a couple of varieties like that every once in a while. Now if you take a look at the very bottom tank, this is what's not only known as an expert-only fish that gets really big. These are spot fin butterflies. These are in the genus Catodon, and they will grow quite large. They grow up to 8 inches, and a lot of these butterflies are actually obligate corallivores. So we talked a little bit about the regal angels, which are obligate spongivores, and these guys are obligate corallivores. So that means they only eat coral polyps, which makes life really difficult if you're trying to get these in. On a fish like this, our challenge again is to, first of all, get it really healthy, and then also get it eating things that are not part of its natural diet. Fortunately for these guys, they also eat they like meaty foods as well. But one of the problems with butterflies is that they often come in with lots of diseases all over them, and they like to be by themselves. So they might pair up, but right now we've got 3 of them in this tank, and we give them somewhere to hide, but we also need them to be out in the open so we can observe how they're doing, see whether or not they're putting on weight, see whether they're eating, and also to see whether there's any obvious signs of disease or parasites or anything like that. This system currently has nothing but hyposalinity, so we've lowered our salinity in it, and the fish can do just fine in that. That helps to kill off some of the parasites, and we're going to put these through a medicated cycle. Because these fish are in the same system with the purple queen anthias, another sensitive species, we're going to, instead of running copper, we're likely going to run chloroquine phosphate instead, which can treat a lot of those diseases. And that's one of the things that we will do. We'll treat them for multiple different diseases in multiple different ways, including using external dewormers and internal dewormers via medicated foods. We'll also use some antibiotics on them, and we'll basically hit them with just about everything so that we can guarantee as much as possible that these fish are as disease-free as they can possibly be. That way, when you bring them home to your house, they have a much better chance of living for a very, very long time. So, this is James, and James is one of our staff here. He is treating some clams and some corals before we even put them into our quarantine system. So anything that comes in, we will dip it, or we will do some sort of dip. For corals, we do a coral dip, and if you take a look in this one, we're going to be adding some coral dip in there that will kill off most invertebrates. And what we'll do after that is we'll put that into our quarantine system, and then we will go ahead and quarantine that for a minimum of 3 weeks. The clams in here are getting a freshwater dip right now. That's to remove as much as possible, and then we'll scrub them off with a toothbrush just to make sure we don't have anything on them that we don't want in our systems. So in this coral dip right now, you can see that there's things falling off of the coral, and those are all the invertebrates. So there was a little snail that just fell off of there, and there's some copepods, and there's some really tiny little isopods in there. But the key with the coral dip is that it will kill off most of those invertebrates. And even though the ones that we're seeing here are pretty much desirable ones, it's still the same thing. You don't want to introduce something that you didn't want in your tank in the first place. And the coral dip will eliminate all those. We also have in this next one over where we're dipping the clams here, even though these are technically captive bred or captive raised, these are also going to be coming right out of the ocean, so they're covered in all kinds of stuff. And if you look, this is a freshwater dip. We've got a little mini brittle star, which is a beneficial organism, but we want to eliminate as much as possible off of these before we end up putting them into our systems, just because there could be things in there that we don't want to see at all, including some of these algae that are on here. If you take a look over here, this is our coral quarantine system. So corals, after they have been dipped, they will go into this system and they spend a week in here, and this is one of the few coral systems that we actually have any fish in. We have a single fish in here right now. Normally we'll keep a type of wrasse, and we'll keep one of these damsels in there. That is a Springer's damsel or a blue sapphire damsel. Those, some of the wrasses that we'll keep in here are great for eating small parasites that escape the dip. Dips can only kill off the active animals, they don't kill off the eggs. So we put these in here along with peppermint shrimp, small hermit crabs, all different kinds of things in here that will pick over these corals. Then we do another visual examination of them, make sure they are as pest-free as possible. And then we'll move those into another dip, and then we'll move them up to this top system, which is currently empty because it's been sterilized. And we'll move these corals up here, give them another 2 weeks minimum of observation, and then we'll put those corals up for sale after that, after we dip them yet again. But drawing your attention back to this tank here, there are a wide variety of different corals, and as you choose a different tank that fits your lifestyle, you know, if you want to have a reef tank, a lot of these corals need really high-end lighting. We use a lot of the Ecotech Radion lights. We also use the Red Sea, Reef LEDs, and also the Aqua Illuminations or AIs. Those are all great lights, have a lot of adjustability, and you can adjust those to suit what your needs are. In this tank here, we have some corals like all the way in the back. Those are gorgonians. Those are really pretty simple, straightforward. They're all photosynthetic, but they're also filter feeders, and their polyps come out and they will take little bits of things out of the water, including small copepods and other things. We've also got some more difficult animals in here, like these. These are hammer corals, and those are all frags of those that we got in, and we're currently quarantining them. They've actually finished their week of quarantine, but our next system's not ready for them yet. Behind that, we've got zoanthids. Zoanthids are usually pretty easy, and they don't require nearly as much light, which is why those are kind of off in the corner in the dark. And then we've also got something like the Goniopora here up in the front. And Goniopora are kind of an oxymoron. They're an easy, difficult coral. You don't need to have perfect water conditions because they actually like to have dirtier water. But at the same time that they like to have dirtier water, you have to have a good tank and a very stable system for those to thrive. The rest of the corals in here are pretty much all SPS corals. Those are all corals that are going to be small polyp cenotherians. So if you look around at all these different corals, these are all Montiporas on there. There's a couple of Gonioporas thrown in there, one Acropora. That's in the back end of that. It's the green one. I'm trying to point right there. We've got some more of the Montiporas over to the right side of that over here. And then over here we've got some more Montiporas. There's one back there. I think that's the Tub stellata, if I'm not mistaken. We've got a couple other Montiporas here. Some of these came out of our tanks for our service clients. Some of them came out of our own personal tanks. But all of these corals have different needs, and based upon what you're looking for, you're going to have different setups. You know, these corals would not be ideal for a small tank that doesn't have adequate lighting, but something like the gorgonians would actually work really well for a smaller tank without adequate lighting, because even though they're photosynthetic, they do a lot of feeding on their own. Well, thanks for tuning in. We love Reef Builders, and we love to be there for you as a hobbyist. And We are open 7 days a week, so come on in, come see us. Where advice is always free, and we will steer you in the right direction to get you on a successful path with that first tank of yours, or even, if you're an expert, we can certainly help you with that, and we can get you into some of the really high-end stuff that you might be looking for, or maybe even introduce you to something that you haven't even thought about trying before. So, thanks for tuning in.
Massive thanks to Dave for that. I had a bit of a virtual tour, and it's nice just to sit down and watch someone else's store, and it's good that he started off with a very popular mid-sized tank like the Red Sea Reefer 170. Again, um, and he echoed what I said last time, which is also great in that he said, choose the fish first. If you want tangs, the tank is too small for you. You need the big tank. If you want small clownfish, seahorses, something completely different, go for that. And then again, it kind of merges with Ross's advice on, do what you want to do. Don't think you have to do marines a certain way or have to keep a certain fish or a certain super cool coral. Keep what you want to keep, and then you'll be a lot happier. But the quarantine advice was really useful, and we definitely recommend that you do it. And I learned something then as well, whereby Dave took the coral colony or the large frag, whatever it was, and hung it upside down in the dip so that stuff fell out of it. Now, obviously, when you get an LPS coral and you dip it, it retracts and the flesh draws in. And if you've got any flatworms or anything like that, they can kind of still stick in it and almost kind of hide from the dip, kind of, take residence deep inside the tissue. But that was really useful for me because he turned it upside down and he said, look, you can see that the critters and the pests actually falling from it. And that was really useful. That's something I'm definitely going to take on. So I recommend that you try it and spread the word about that. So yeah, another really useful 2 videos from Ross and Dave. And again, please subscribe. It's a new channel, and like, comment, and have a chance of winning the Aquavitro skimmer from Seachem and the Radiant LED light from Ecotech Marine. Um, Thanks to our sponsors, and thank you once again for watching. Happy reef keeping.